Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/Great Detectives. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. I do want to remind you, as you're making your travel plans, remember JohnnyDollarAir.com. JohnnyDollarAir.com is a Priceline affiliate link, so part of the purchase price benefits the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio at no additional cost to you. So remember, when making your travel plans, check JohnnyDollarAir.com first. Well, now it is time for this week's episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. The original air date, July 14th, 1957, and the title is Heatherstone Players Matter.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Johnny Dollar.
Ah, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world.
Who's that?
Garrett Reynolds, Johnny.
Reynolds in Trenton?
That's right, New Jersey State Mutual Life.
Well, what was the quote from Shakespeare about? Hamlet, wasn't it?
Alas, I would a tale unfold whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul, freeze thy young blood, make thy two eyes like stars dart from their spheres, thy knotted and combined love apart.
Now, wait a minute, will you?
My hair to stand on end like quills upon the fretful porpentine.
Garrett, have you gone off your rocker?
Why don't you come on down here and see?
Yeah, I think I'd better. Bob Bailey in the exciting adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the New Jersey State Mutual Life Insurance Company, Trenton, New Jersey office. Following is an account of expenses incurred during my investigation of the Heatherstone Players matter. Expense account item 1, $9.80. Train fare, lunch, and incidentals on the trip from Hartford to Trenton, New Jersey. Item 2, 70 cents. Taxi to Garrett Reynolds' office.
Glad you wasted no time, Johnny. Sit down. I'll get right to the point.
Big rush, huh?
If I read the signs right, yes.
Okay. Whom were you expecting to get bumped off this
Ever
time?
hear of the Heatherstone Players?
Huh? Sounds like a summer theater or a traveling stock company.
It's Cyril Peter St. George Heatherstone.
Cyril
And he's
Peter.
just as bad as he sounds. An old Shakespearean actor, a real ham.
Oh, friends, Romans,
Oh, no.
countrymen.
Don't do it.
What's the matter?
It'll be bad enough when he gets here. Any minute now.
What do you mean?
Every other sentence, a quote from the immortal bard.
Oh.
By the time you've listened to him for 5 minutes, you never want to hear of Shakespeare again.
Sounds like he might be fun.
Fun? He's poison. And if he gets knocked off, it'll cost the company $10,000.
All right, come on, tell me off.
He keeps traveling around, conducting classes in Shakespeare and putting on occasional performances with the local talent. After he gets all their dough from them, that is. Whenever he pulls out of a town, he leaves behind a lot of unpaid bills.
No wonder he keeps traveling around.
It's no joke. He also leaves behind a lot of enemies and a lot of broken hearts. He thinks he's Romeo himself or Casanova. Anyhow, he's back here in Trenton. He's putting on a Shakespearean festival over radio station WVGR.
Oh, well, hey now, maybe I could join the cast. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the East, and Juliet is
Will
the
you
sun.
cut it out? This is serious.
So am I. But go on.
There is not one of his cast or crew there at the radio station doesn't hate every bone in his body. Except maybe young Joni Carter.
And who's she?
Oh, she's the girl he picked to play Juliet and Ophelia. He's promised her a shining career on the stage and stardom in pictures and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, maybe she's good.
Oh, don't kid yourself. It's part of his act to charm her away from Charlie Cubberly.
And who is he?
He's also in the cast. He's getting nothing but bit parts.
Well, I still see no cause for alarm.
Oh, you will, Johnny. If you ever attend one of those rehearsals,
Well, look, if they all hate him so, why don't they just walk out on
The
him?
old shyster's got them tied down to contracts. Must have signed them with their eyes closed. They're stuck with him, Johnny, until the festival is over. Or until somebody kills him.
You think it's that serious?
Johnny, one way or another, he has taken everybody he's ever come into contact with.
Even you?
Even me. Number of times I've had to go through the operation of changing the beneficiary on his policy.
Who is the beneficiary?
As of the moment, Joan Carter.
The actress you mentioned.
The girl I mentioned. He uses the policy as a come-on to charm the poor, unsuspecting young...
Oh, what has this day deserved? What has it done that it, in golden letters, should be set among the high tides of the calendar?
What the Sam?
King John, my boy, Act 3, Scene 1. Mayhap for your plebeian ear, I should have asked this churlish fellow next to you why for he sent for me this hour.
Heatherstone, this is Johnny Dollar.
Oh? And here's my hand.
And mine, sir, with my heart in it. Uncle.
Good man, that's from the Tempest, Act 2.
Oh,
not that I give you a charge.
Look, Heatherstone, I've asked Dollar to act as your bodyguard until this play of yours is over and you can get out of town.
Play festival, dear sir, in which the immortal Shakespeare's works, beneath my practiced hand, shall so enchant.
Yeah, wait a minute, Heatherstone. Garrett, I'm not going to serve
I
as any...
said bodyguard. I've received 3 anonymous notes telling me in no uncertain terms that his life isn't worth a plugged nickel around that studio.
Threats, huh?
Just warning.
What matter? To quote the bard, I bear a charmed life.
Have you given those notes to the police?
Yeah, but I haven't heard back from him. That's why I sent for you in such a hurry.
How fitting that my end should come there, on stage, so to speak.
What?
Blow wind, come rack. At least I'll die with harness on me back. Which is to say, my friend, that I'll die with me boots on.
Yeah, I got that. Has anybody threatened you in person, Heatherstone?
Yeah. And what about that girl, Joan, and the way Charlie covered it?
Ah, her beauty makes the vault a feasting presence full of light.
Oh, listen, will you? I'm talking about Charlie, the boy she's thrown over for you and your phony promises. That boy's crazy enough with jealousy to try almost anything.
Ah, he is mad.
Right.
That he is mad, 'tis true. 'Tis true, 'tis pity. And pity 'tis true.
Heatherstone, he's mad enough to kill you. And so are some of the others.
Yeah, I've heard you're pretty rough on your cast of actors, on your crew.
Well, I must be cruel, only to be kind.
Now, what's that supposed to
They're
mean?
so ambitious, all of them, but so inadequate, so futilely do they attempt to gain the highest talent of this art, with which I am so rich endowed.
All right. Look, please. Apparently, Garrett feels that your life is in danger.
I'm sure of it.
And as long as I've come all the way down here, I'll take his word for it. That every one of your associates has a serious personal reason for wanting to see you out of the way.
What private griefs they have, alas, I know not.
Listen, will you?
But this I do avow.
Heatherstone, don't you care that somebody's out to get you?
My cast, my crew, you say?
Yes.
Ah, me? Stands not within the prospect of belief.
Look, the fact remains...
And yet, if 'twere true, then I must bear a countenance more in sorrow than in anger. In gratitude toward me, who've given them so much.
Believe me, it is true. That's why I insist you have somebody to look out for you until you can get out of town.
These words are razors to me, wound.
That's why I sent for Dollar.
This man, huh?
Yes.
Let me have men about me who are
Here
fat,
we go again.
sleek-headed men, and such a sleeper night. Yon Dollar has a lean and hungry look. He thinks too much. Such men are dangerous.
Will you shut up?
And yet, suppose I am to die.
Believe me, if it weren't for the $10,000 it cost the company, I sometimes think I'd like to take care of that little matter myself.
And you would be found out.
That's what you think.
Then, Dollar, look upon his face. I quote,
Huh?
so full of artless jealousy is guilt, it spills itself in fearing to be spilt.
All right. The fact remains that in spite of what Garrett says, you're determined to go ahead with this play, this festival of yours.
I am.
In spite of the threats on your life.
Why not? All that live must die, passing through nature to eternity.
Okay. When's your next rehearsal?
Well, this afternoon, but sir...
Station WVGR, right?
Aye, correct, but sir...
And I'm going to be there.
To interfere with me at work?
No. To hide in a corner and see if all this fuss over you is justified. To see if the atmosphere down there is as thick as Garrett says it is. To either take on this case or not, depending on whether I think your life's really in danger.
Oh, Johnny, his life has been in danger for years.
Of course.
You, admit it?
Why, that I do. So therefore, harm. If harm they could have done would long ago have caught me in its grasp.
Yeah, well, maybe you've just been lucky.
Aye. In the past, I quote, treason has done his worst. Nor steel nor poison, malice domestic, foreign levy, nothing can touch me further.
Oh, Lord.
And with that thought, I bid thee now adieu.
Yeah, well, goodbye.
And yet, perhaps, for best we talk this out, I quote, to fear the worst of yours the worst. Good day, gentlemen.
You want a drink?
Garrett, that is the craziest clown I've ever met. But I still don't really see what you're worried about.
That's because all you've seen is the amusing side of him. But I tell you, Johnny, look, did you mean that about going over to the studio?
Yeah, sure. And frankly, more to see how a radio show is put together than anything else.
Then I'll arrange for you to sit in the control room with the engineer, the fellow who keeps the voices and sound effects and music and things in balance.
Great. I'll have a ball.
Yeah? Well, you'll see why I sent for you. Why I'm so sure somebody's going to murder Heatherstone.
Hey, if I didn't know you so well, Garrett, I'd think you were planning to do it yourself and call me in as a cover-up.
You know something, Johnny?
Well?
I'll call the studio, make arrangements for you.
I couldn't help feeling that Garrett's own resentment of Cyril Heatherstone was for a lot more than the mere fact he'd have to revise his policy a few more times. But if so, he wouldn't admit it to me. Item 3, $1.25 taxi to the studios at WVGR. There I was escorted backstage, so to speak, to the control room. It was a small room, facing into the main studio through a large soundproof plate glass window, and it was loaded with complicated equipment. Before the control panel, with its knobs and keys and dials, sat Gordon Mitchell, the engineer, a nice-looking chap in his 30s. Through the window, we could see Heatherstone and the cast gathered around a table, working on the script.
Sit here right beside me, Dollar, and you can see and hear everything that goes on in there.
Oh, well, sure. Thanks, Gordon. Is that microphone sitting in the middle of the studio there the one they use when they're on the air?
Yeah, that's one of them. There's one over there beside all that equipment for the sound effects men.
Oh, yes, I see.
And then there's another one in that booth over against the wall.
And what's that for?
Two isolated for special voice effects, like a voice coming over a telephone, things like that. A filter mic.
Oh, I see.
And then the one hanging over the table where they're reading will be for the orchestra when it comes in later.
Uh-huh. Say, you have a lot of stuff to balance when you're doing a show, haven't you? More knobs and dials and stuff.
You see here? This knob controls the mic over their table out there. Listen, I'll fade them in.
What, do the line stretch out to the crack of doom?
Who's that? Charlie Coverley. Plays one of the small...
Well, what?
Oh.
Well, idiot!
Well, you said to get everything we could out of the line.
That I did.
So I added a couple of words to make the speech sound
You
more...
added to Shakespeare.
Well, I thought...
There we go, Dollar.
No, fool! Listen to his own words. To gild refined gold, to paint the lily, to throw a perfume on the violet is wasteful and ridiculous excess. Remember that and stop being ridiculous.
You heard enough, Dollar? Yeah, I'll cut it off.
A gentleman's son.
Brother, he really tears into them, doesn't he?
Believe me, that was nothing. Dollar, he's the most hated man in this town.
So I've heard. Pretty fast dealer, too.
You're not kidding. Yeah, he sure nicked me.
How do you mean?
All my savings. You know, invest in this Shakespearean festival. He'll get a sponsor. We'll all make $1 million. Well, if it wasn't for the beneficial finance company, I'd be on my uppers.
That way, huh?
And poor Charlie out there not only lost his shirt to Cyril, but his girl, too.
That little blonde beside him? The one who's talking now?
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll open her mic again.
That's right, my dear boy.
There's rosemary. That's for remembrance. Pray you, Lord, remember.
What?
And there's pansies. That's for thought. There's fennel for you, and here's some for me. We may call it herb brace o' Sunday.
Wonderful. You make the role of Ophelia live.
Oh, boy.
If you don't quit pawing her, I'm going to...
Silence! Unhand me, sir. I'm silent.
Yes, Charles, you mustn't interrupt Cyril. You mustn't.
Here we
Why,
go.
sir?
Yes.
Where's your humility, Charles, before me, the master? Remember this common proof that lowliness in young ambition's ladder.
Sorry, Dollar. I can't take it.
Gordon, that guy is the most egotistical character I've ever seen.
He isn't going to live long.
Who were you thinking of?
Any of that group out there, and the sound crew, and the musicians. There isn't one of them hasn't got murder in his eye. I told the insurance...
What were you going to say?
I sent a couple of notes to Cyril's insurance man. He's an old friend of mine.
Oh?
I didn't sign them because I didn't want to get involved. But I told him what I'm telling you. Somebody's going to kill that guy out there unless you were...
Wait a sec. He wants you.
Yeah.
What's sit and gossip in there when there's work to be done?
Oh, sorry, Cyril. Mr. Heatherstone.
Irresponsible lout. This is a rehearsal. That talkback's too loud.
First it's too quiet, now it's too loud.
Sounds as though you're shouting at me, and that I will not have.
Okay, sorry.
Believe me, you will be sorry ere this task is done.
Believe me, I am sorry. I ever got messed up.
Now, I shall rehearse my lines with Hamlet's father's ghost, that you may learn how Shakespeare should be read. Is the filter mic in order, Mitchell?
Yes, sir. Right in the isolation booth.
Very well. Then hearken, all of you, to the great lines from the lips and heart of a great actor. Notice the pear-shaped toe.
Really likes himself, doesn't he?
Look at those kids. Look at their eyes. See what I meant a minute ago? There's murder in them.
Who's that came in the door, the back door of the isolation booth?
Oh, it's one of the sound effects men. He takes care of it.
Hi, boys and girls. How's the old... Silence! Whoops. Now, is this microphone on and working properly? Well, Mitchell?
Yeah, it's on, but work a little closer to it, will you, and with a bit less voice?
You tell me how to use a microphone? Now, quiet, all of you.
Well, what's he waiting for?
The mood, Dollar. The mood. Oh, come on, you old ghost.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night, and for the day confined to fasting fires, till the foul cry done. Foul cry.
Don't tell me he's forgotten his line.
Hence, horrible shadow.
That's not the script.
Thy drugs are quick.
What is this?
My dismal scene I needs must act alone. Past hope, past cure, past help.
Wait a minute.
I call upon the gods to
Oh, what's happening?
I don't know, Dollar.
Act two of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in a moment.
Who among us has not hoped for a better life? Who has not had a desire to help stamp out disease and suffering among more unfortunate people throughout the world? Many have wanted to help, and many have done so. That sort of work is going on everywhere. Everywhere there is hope for freedom and a better life. Outstanding in this field of activity is Project Hope, which operates from a converted U.S. Navy hospital ship called, appropriately enough, the Hope. The good ship Hope carries out its mission of mercy in far eastern waters. Wherever doctors, nurses, dentists, sanitation, and public health experts are needed, the Hope steams full speed ahead and gives what help it can. In addition to giving medical aid, the staff of the Hope works with local doctors to acquaint them with the newest of medicines and medical procedures. At the same time, the staff of the Hope learns a great deal about the symptoms and the cures of diseases with which they have had no previous contact. When the Hope was in the United States Navy, it was called the Consolation. And it is certain that the people who now operate her will give both consolation and hope to those who are suffering. consolation, hope, and a new life. For wherever the hospital ship Hope is anchored, its staff is to make emergency trips to scenes of disasters and epidemics. Their services include a wide variety of skills, from removing a tumor from a child's neck to putting a bandage on an old woman's cut finger. But most importantly, with the hope comes friendship and understanding. Good medicine for healthy freedom, which is the right of all men everywhere.
And now, Act Two of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, and the Heatherstone Players Matter. Cyril Peter St. George Heatherstone was dead. There was no doubt about it. And the old Shakespearean actor had died muttering the words of the immortal bard, there at radio station WVGR in Trenton, New Jersey. When he fell in the isolation booth at one side, I immediately rushed into the main studio, checked the dead man's body, his clothes. I searched every nook and cranny of the isolation booth and came up with nothing.
He's dead. Cyril is dead. It's terrible. It's terrible.
Is it? Well, I'm glad he's dead. He's had it coming for a long, long time. Oh, stop it, Joan. Stop it.
But he was going to make me an actress. A great actress. A star.
Oh, don't kid yourself, Joni. He was taking you like he took the rest of us. And me, I'm glad to see him lying there.
Who are you?
Huh? Oh, Don Ringo, sound effects man. I just came in time to... Hey, wait a minute. Who are you?
Johnny Dollar, insurance investigator.
Investigator?
That's right. Gordon.
Yeah, Dollar?
That phone in the control room. Can you call outside on it?
Sure.
Then call headquarters. Get somebody from homicide over here.
Right you are.
Don.
Yes, sir?
I want you to stay right here by this isolation booth. Make sure that nobody... Say, who, by the way, opened the door of this booth?
What? I did, Mr. Dollar.
Did you touch his body?
No. Oh, no.
Well, I hope not, because...
What's the matter, Mr. Dollar?
Plenty.
What is it, Mr. Dollar?
Well, at least I know what killed him.
Yeah?
What? Don, you stay here.
Okay.
The rest of you, back to the rehearsal table. I want to talk to you. It was so faint I wasn't quite sure for a second. But there was no doubt about that odor that came from the isolation booth. Like peach blossoms, only more delicate and more deadly. It was the odor of potassium paetin. And I'm glad the trace of it was faint, because one good whiff at full strength would kill almost instantly. Had killed. I'd left Don Ringo there at the booth to watch him, to see if he made any move toward Heatherstone's body. For Don had been the last one near him before he died. All right, now. Officially, there's nothing I can do until the police get here.
You said you know what killed him, Mr. Dollar.
Yes.
Potassium paetin, Charlie. Ever hear of it?
Well, no, of course not.
One tiny crystal, if swallowed, kills instantly. Or a single whiff of it when it's heated, vaporized. Same thing.
You think maybe he committed suicide, Mr. Dollar?
What do you think, John?
Well, what do you mean? Doesn't sound like Heatherstone to me, Dollar. Kill himself.
All right, so he needed help from someone in this room. And, Don, you were the last one near him.
Now, wait a minute.
Okay. Charlie?
Yes, sir?
Can you think of anybody here who might have had a better motive for killing Heatherstone than you?
No. No, I can't.
Charlie.
I wanted to see that phony, egotistical shyster dead more than anything else in the world. But I wouldn't have killed him.
Well, I would, Charlie, gladly, and I make no bones about it. Police will be here any minute, Dollar.
Good. How about your feelings in the matter, Don?
Sure. I'm glad he's been knocked off. But don't accuse me of having done
I'm not accusing anybody yet. But this is kind of funny. The only one who admits he would have killed Heatherstone is Gordon here. But he was in the control room with me, not only when it happened, but long before it happened. And potassium paetin doesn't wait. The rest of you, though, were right here next to Heatherstone. Any one of you could have slipped the stuff to him before he walked into that isolation booth.
Yeah? But how would we have made him take it?
That's a good question.
Did you find any of that potassium, whatever it is, in the booth?
No, but I got a good whiff of it.
Well, you said it had to be vaporized.
For the paetin gas to do its work, yes.
Dollar, could a capsule of it have been tossed into the booth or maybe left in there for him to step on?
Then where's the capsule? Gordon and I went over that booth with a fine-tooth comb. Joan.
Yes, Mr. Dollar.
Are you the only one who touched him before I came in from the control room?
I didn't touch him. I told
But you were the only one who went into the booth, weren't you?
Yes.
The only one who could have removed any evidence of the means used to get that vaporized paetin in there.
Mr. Dollar,
Look here, Dollar. If you're saying that Joni had anything to do with... What's the matter with you? Didn't you know that she was in love with that...
All right, Charlie, all right, take it easy.
I thought I loved him, Charles.
Honey.
I guess it took this to bring me to my senses.
Joni, oh, Joni.
All right, look. We've got a murder on our hands. And unless the police are able to come up with more than I have, well... But they weren't. The doctor who came along with Lieutenant Harper agreed with my conclusion that Heatherstone had died from a hefty whiff of Phaeton gas. But neither of them could find any possible source of the gas, even after thorough inspection of the isolation booth, the studio, and every one of us in it. Nothing. Dead end. Finally, after some 4 hours of futile questioning.
Well, it was murder, all right, Dollar. No question about it.
Any suspects, Lieutenant?
Any suspects? All of them. Every one of them. Except maybe the guy who was in the control room with you.
Lieutenant, that should make him number one in the list.
You've been reading too many mystery stories.
Oh, look, Lieutenant. How much longer are we going to have to stay around here?
You anxious to get away? What's your name, Ringo?
Well, I mean it after all, you know.
Inspector, would there be any harm in putting my equipment away?
What equipment?
Oh, mics and mic cables, patch connections on the board in the control room, so on.
You see any reason, Dollar?
No. Go ahead, Gordon.
Thanks. A little tired of just standing around.
What about us, Lieutenant?
Is it doing any good to keep us here?
Look, somebody in this place killed Heatherstone.
Yeah, but you're not getting anywhere finding out who it was. Are we all under suspicion?
Yeah, excuse me, Dollar. You're standing on this mic cable.
Oh, sorry.
I asked you a question, Lieutenant.
The answer is yes. Yes, you're all under suspicion.
But what good is keeping us here?
You'd rather be locked up?
Excuse me again, Dollar. Now this cable.
Oh, sure. Hey, now, wait a minute.
That's the cable for the mic in that booth?
Yeah, that's right. Excuse me.
Yeah, you can go ahead and take it away.
Gordon.
Those mics all stay in the studio?
Yes, sir. Oh, if you ever want to inspect them...
Inspect them? What for?
What? Oh, I didn't know.
Maybe I know, Gordon.
What?
This cable to the booth mic. It's thicker than the other.
Oh, yeah. Probably an old one.
Or maybe it's bigger because it has a couple of extra leads in it, extra wires.
Yeah, the old one's dead. That's why...
Come on, Lieutenant.
Huh?
You too, Gordon. Got a screwdriver?
Sure. In my pocket. Here you are. Some pliers, too, if you want them. If I don't understand why...
Now, this mic in the booth.
Oh, careful, Mr. Dollar. That's pretty delicate.
Then you do it. Take the faceplate off this mic.
Sure. But why?
Yeah, Dollar.
Potassium Phaeton. A crystal of potassium Phaeton. Vaporized in this booth.
Oh, sure, but you going to tell me how?
Well, maybe I'm just guessing, but I think so. Go ahead, Gordon.
Yes, sir. Well, I still don't... There you are. Well, there's the insides of it.
Yeah. And that's all.
There's a... Look. This tiny ball of fused metal.
Yeah.
All that's left of a heating element that was melted away inside this mic. Thanks to the extra wires in that cable.
Oh, it's probably just a little piece of stuff.
Look at the color. A livid red. Typical of the action of potassium Phaeton on fused metal.
Huh?
On the heating element that was placed in the mic and destroyed by a surge of current through it.
Hey, that color, that's right. You're right. Well, then...
The one man who didn't hesitate to say how he felt about Heatherstone. Who said he would kill him. Who warned us. And the one man with an alibi because I was there in the control room with him. I suppose you disconnected the power leads to that cable when you went into the control room to call the police, didn't you, Gordon?
Yeah, Mr. Dollar, you guessed right again. But it was a good try, wasn't it? No flight of angels will sing him to his rest.
So, that was it. And the company will have to pay the claim. Expense account total, including incidentals and fare back to Hartford, $51.25. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Now, here is our star to tell you about next week's story.
Next week, the Yours Truly matter. And I give you one guess about the name of the victim. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, originates in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote tonight's story. Heard in our cast were Virginia Gregg, Lawrence Dobkin, Dick Crenna, Sam Edwards, Frank Gerstle, Herb Vigran, and Hans Conried. Be sure to join us next week, same time and station, for another exciting story of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Welcome back. The insight into how a radio production worked back in 1957 was interesting, and it definitely provides some fuel for the imagination. Hans Conried turned in a good performance as Heatherstone. He worked extensively in radio, and Heatherstone was an extension of one of the stock characters he played. You can find versions of this sort of hammy character on programs like The Alan Young Show and Birds and Allen. That said, did I like this episode? Not really, and I think it hit me differently than it did when I listened to it 10 years ago. I did go back and listen to my commentary, and I actually had a lot of praise for it back in 2014, and I highlighted some of the same things. I also praised, and I think it's worth renewing the praise for Virginia Gregg, who showed what a good actress she was by playing someone who couldn't act, which again is just proof of her acting talent. Part of what makes this not as enjoyable for me the second time through is that I've listened to later works, and there were things that Johnstone started doing that over time kind of became pain points in the weaker Johnstone scripts. And a lot of those are here. For example, the really long opening segment. I mean, we're at the 10-minute mark before he even gets out of the insurance office. That's just a lot. Now, that's not to say all of the Johnstone episodes are bad. Far from it. But there are some that work less well than others. And like I said, this one definitely had some of those issues. And part of the problem with Heatherstone is that while he was well acted, he was not a lot of fun to be around. He was a bit insufferable, really. And it wasn't that he was a ham. Hams can be endearing, and certainly many of the more comedic hams that Conried played were that. It wasn't even that he was a shady character whose acts at best were operating in a legal gray area in terms of taking people's money for production that was not going to pay off. He who steals my purse steals trash. Othello. See, I can do it too. But he who steals my purse and then abuses me, oh, that's another matter. The thing is that Shakespearean acting is a very specialized skill. Shakespeare's plays are beautifully poetic, but at the same time, the language is not modern English, and it wasn't in 1957. The good Shakespearean actors can make Shakespeare make sense to the ordinary viewer or listener. In person, on stage, or on film, your body language, facial expression, the pacing of your words, and in audio, your voice tone, taken with music and other cues, can communicate the ideas Shakespeare was trying to get across, along with the language that people can understand. Being able to act well in Shakespearean plays is a skill. These people didn't have it. He knew they didn't have it when he hired them, and then he essentially starts lording it over them and abusing them about how incompetent they are, and it's just unpleasant. It established a motive for murder, but this is a case where I don't think show, don't tell works particularly well. I couldn't help but find myself wondering if Heatherstone was based on someone Johnstone had encountered during his long career in radio, which, depending on the source, began in 1931, or 1932. In the early 1930s, it was very much a Wild West in radio, with a lot of independent stations and a huge demand for programming, and there were some unethical characters. In fact, if you'll recall, if you've been listening for a while, we played a Sherlock Holmes episode from the early 1930s, a couple years back, and they had an announcement at the end that actors starring as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson were the only authorized actors, and this was the only authorized production, which implied that there was some radio station out there that was putting on unauthorized Sherlock Holmes and Watson plays at a time when those stories were not in the public domain. And that just gives you an idea of the sort of conditions that prevailed in the 1930s. Heatherstone would have been a much more probable character then. You could see him going around hiring poor, desperate people who really couldn't act all that well, not paying them a whole lot, and hoping to produce some sort of drama that he could syndicate and sell to all these drama-hungry independent stations that were out there. Even the situation where he was corrected about his microphone levels and then lashed out would have been believable in the 1930s, because one of the great struggles that many stage actors had early in radio and talking movies was that they struggled with the idea that radio and film called for smaller acting and not as much volume, because you weren't trying to project through an entire theater. But you can imagine in the 1930s, Heatherstone upbraiding poor actors who couldn't handle the material he was giving them, while he was, in his role, shouting into the microphone like he was trying to project into a 500-seat theater. In 1957, he's not as credible a character, and we just spent way too much time establishing repeatedly that he's unlikable. And at some point, it's like, yes, we get it. Can we move on? I will say that the overall setup of the murder mystery was clever and it was interesting, but then I kind of felt cheated by the way it got resolved. You want to feel like your detective did something. And when the killer says, "You mind if I draw attention to myself in the most obvious way possible?" that kind of undermines it, particularly when he's like, "Okay, let me just wave this clue right under your nose. Does this do anything for you?" Plus, the request is audacious, and the police were foolish to agree, even with Johnny's consent. "Oh, so you want to go ahead and disturb our unprocessed crime scene before the lab boys have thoroughly examined everything, thus compromising the whole area and potentially inadvertently destroying vital evidence? I think we better ask the insurance investigator first." If this whole thing with Heatherstone were based on a real incident, I can only hope that writing about it was cathartic and made John Stone feel better, but it doesn't do a whole lot for me, particularly this time around. Well, listener comments and feedback now. And we have an interesting story was sent to me by Bob. It's actually off the AP Wire, and the headline is, "In Iran, the old-time U.S. radio detective Johnny Dollar returns to the airwaves." And the story, and I don't want to read the whole AP story, but I'll kind of summarize and maybe quote a little, is that the Iranian version of Johnny Dollar is returning to the air. Now, we haven't talked about the Iranian version. It's entirely a different sort of setup, but in the 1960s, the Iranian state radio under the Shah of Iran began to air its own version of Johnny Dollar. Now, in this particular version, there was not the expense account, and it was more focused on murder cases specifically, And there was also a solve-it-yourself element, where Johnny would find the perpetrators and then the audience would be asked to send in a letter guessing how Johnny found the perpetrators. And those who guessed correctly got entered into a raffle. This is part of the Shah's effort to modernize Iran. But then, of course, you had the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And that sort of thing came to an end. Now, though, yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is back on the air, being broadcast over state radio in Farsi. So far, they broadcast 9 episodes. Now, the AP story writes about it, but in many ways, it doesn't have a whole lot of answers. You know, one of the big things with journalism is to kind of figure out why. Why is this happening? Because it's not like there's been a change in philosophy at the Iranian state radio. So why are they broadcasting new episodes of a series that made a lot of sense when Iran was allied with the United States, and the Iranian version of Johnny Dollar is set in the U.S.? So the biggest question about this is not answered in the article. The closest it comes is when the director says that he decided to make the episodes available on Farsi translations to attract more audiences to radio broadcasts, which to me just doesn't seem like an answer. But again, with Iran, you're dealing with, in many ways, still a very closed society where there's just a whole lot of no comments. What did really touch me and stand out in the article was some of the comments from people who listened to the original series. And quoting from the article, Mustafa Naziri, a 76-year-old retired engineer, remembered winning a watch as a teenager in 1966 for answering correctly. It was a precious gift, he wistfully recounted. I got it from the office of the radio broadcaster, and I was publicly honored in school for that. Some years later, I sold it for $70. And it does say in the article that college students are aware of Johnny Dollar in Iran because their grandparents and those who remember the series have passed down things about it, like the opening line. Which reminds me of how many people remember or know about old-time radio here in America from their parents and grandparents and the stories they told. And this other line in the story, the final graph in here from Mahiri Bagiri says, "It is beautiful to listen to the stories that revive many memories. Then I went home to one of my friends' homes to listen to the show and have a good time." To me, it does highlight the power and the emotional significance of the audio drama medium. And it's a power that I think crosses language and culture. And again, I've got a lot of questions, and the AP article doesn't have answers. So that's the best takeaway I can give you. Thanks so much for sharing the article, Bob. Then we have a couple of comments on Instagram from Brains Benton regarding 2 recent Johnny Dollar episodes. Regarding the funny money matter, Brains writes, "This was a charming episode." And then regarding the Parley Baron matter, "The character name made me laugh. I bet it amused the original audience too." I don't know how much the original audience or what percentage paid attention to the name of radio character actors, so it may have gone over a lot of listeners' heads, but those who did pay attention certainly would have been amused. Then we have a comment from a listener on YouTube regarding the Mount Rushmore conversation. Oh, if you're doing Mount Rushmores, there would have to be a very big Pat Novak rock. Jack Webb's poor soul of a detective with the most fiercely sardonic dialogue ever. And sometimes you just have the right elements working for you at the right time. Writing, directing, and acting. And what acting and actors in this show? It's the chemistry of Webb, Tudor, and Burr that sets this show apart from pretty much anything else out there. If I was going to suggest a show for someone to start his or her old-time radio journey, I might suggest this one more than any other. It's refreshingly modern. It's so sad that there's only a handful of episodes out there. I'm discounting the dreadful recasted version. I'd be happy to lose those in favor of finding more web ones. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the comment. And I really do love Pat Novak for Hire. In fact, when I'm going back through some of the archives for editing, if I come across a Pat Novak for Hire episode, I'm very likely to engage in listening to more than I strictly need to for whatever business purpose there is. And there's a reason I chose it as one of the first series that we did on the podcast back in 2009. And I also think you're right about the timing. The original San Francisco version came out in 1946, just as the hard-boiled Radio Private Eye was becoming popular. And then 1949, it was at the point of the hard-boiled Radio Private Eye being at the peak of popularity. And it really embodies that spirit. And it was also at a point where the principals had not yet become stars. Of course, Jack Webb would become a star with Dragnet, Raymond Burr with Perry Mason, and Richard Breen would go on to win Oscars for his screenwriting. So there was a limited window for this series to actually happen. And it's really helped by being on radio, because you can just focus on the language. Now, Johnny Madero is not the same series, but I think it was a decent enough imitation. And Johnny Madero radio episodes were adapted into short films, and they did not work particularly well. I mean, they're not the worst thing in the world, but seeing Johnny Madero or Pat Novak in a visual medium is not particularly interesting. It's the words, it's the language, and it's the delivery that makes them so compelling. And in radio drama, you can just focus on that, and that's what makes the radio series work. And I also appreciated you mentioning and reminded me of the Ben Morris episodes, which were produced in San Francisco after both Jack Webb and Richard Breen had left for Hollywood. And they decided, we think we can continue this series. I don't recognize them, and I did not actually play them on the podcast. And I was thinking that I was making some big, grand exception in not playing the latter Denning and Britton radio episodes of Mr. and Mrs. North, when I actually did that with one of the very first series I played on the podcast back in 2009. I would say that you learn something new every day, except I think now I've gotten to the point, and this would be more apt to say in this case, that you remember something that you used to know before you forgot about it every day. Thank you so much for your comment. Now it's time to thank our Patreon supporter of the day. And I want to go ahead. This is our first Friday in October, and I want to thank our anniversary Patreon. Thank you so much to Charlie. Charlie has been one of our Patreon supporters since October 2019, currently supporting the podcast at the Seamus level of $4 or more per month. Thank you so much for supporting the show these past 5 years. And that will do it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. And if you're enjoying this podcast on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and mark the notification bell. We'll be back next Friday with another episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. But join us back here tomorrow for Dragnet, where...
Estimated damage about $1,800, is that right?
That's what I figure, yes. My law books are over $600 alone.
borrowed the money from the bank for the furniture.
You haven't noticed any kids in the neighborhood, none of them around while you were moving in?
No, I didn't see any. I moved everything in myself, rented a trailer, made several trips to get it all over here. Guess that was a silly thing to do.
Why?
Well, the store where I bought the furniture said they'd deliver it, but I couldn't wait to see everything in. First office, you know.
Yeah, we understand.
Well, like I said, I made several trips with the trailer, and I didn't lock the office each time I left. Didn't figure it was necessary. The fellow across the hall with Bueller said he'd keep an eye on things for me.
But you did lock up last night, didn't you?
Oh, yes. As soon as I was moved in, I locked the place at all times when I wasn't here.
That's it.
We'll get right on it.
I don't have to tell you again. I want a fast answer.
Where do we start?
With an empty paper can.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/Great Detectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.